Hello and welcome to another Doctor's Assistant 1 video. Today I'm doing a video on something a little bit different for my channel. I'm just going to be talking about like autism and Asperger's syndrome and like what that is and how that can affect people. Having it myself as a 23-year-old of this recording, it brings a lot of pros and cons to my life, and I don't really talk about it that often on the channel. And sorry for the terrible lighting, but I don't really have any lighting set up, so obviously with the windows being open and me filming this way, you're getting lots of light and it looks terrible, and yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, I wrote, I think, about 10 bullet points. These are just sort of very vague, sort of broad strokes of like different things that I've sort of come across interacting with other people on the spectrum, whether it be people from my family or people from, school or college or whatever else, or wherever else, in my life and that. And what was the other thing? And some of these things are things that affect me, which, if you couldn't already tell, like both in, as I say, a positive and a negative way, and if you couldn't already tell, like with those things, I might come across as though I'm like talking more about them and that. And the reason being is because I know more, because of my own personal sort of experience slash sort of experience with said thing, and that, and so like if there's certain things that I'm not really like deep diving in, that's probably why, because I don't really want to just deep dive into everything and then get loads of things wrong and get loads of people being angry at me or something. And also I'm not a doctor, spoiler alert, but so like if you think that some of these things, these sorts of traits slash characteristics pop up in someone you know, like a family member, like son or daughter, or a niece or nephew, or someone you work with, like a student and or like pupil at like primary school or secondary school, like just because they have a trait from what I'm saying, don't just assume that they're on the spectrum. Like, I mean, it'd be great if you then took like their parent or carer aside and sort of said, maybe this is why they're struggling, but also like don't just like be a bull in a china shop and just like sort of run in head first and just sort of assume things, I guess. But yeah, the list starts off with sensory issues. Number one being sensory issues. For me, I have quite a lot of, I'm like overstimulated by sensory stuff, so meaning like I hear, when I go out and about, I hear a lot more noise than the average person and that can be really difficult, when travelling places or being in a big crowded shopping centre, for example, or like hearing the background music in that, not only is it just sort of music that I don't really like, it's just garbled noise at that point as well. I know my mum always says like, oh, you can always ask people to, politely ask the people at like, I don't know, HMV or Five Guys or wherever you are, to like lower the volume and stuff, but like sometimes you can always guarantee that if I asked, then someone else, that person in question would be a bit arsey with me and be a bit like, oh, why do you do that, there's no issue, everyone else is fine with it, why are you making a big song and dance about it, sort of thing. Or like that's why a lot of other people, myself included, have like ear defenders or like things like headphones on and listen to music or or as I say, ear defenders to just sort of lower slash have a bit of a barrier between us and that stimuli. Heat is another one. I can get very hot and cold very quickly, and my temperature, my core temperature, and the way I react to heat seems to be like almost lizard-like, I feel like, compared to like my mum and that. What else? I guess touch as well. I'm oversensitive to that. Like my mum or my dad will just put like the hand on my shoulder or like shake hands or whatever, and I just kind of get a bit like, I can't always do that. But then there are other people who are on the spectrum who are the opposite, where they need like full on like a hand squeeze like that, and then shake, like you're almost crushing a hand, whereas I would like Edward Scissorhands, like the most gentlest of like sensory touch, it can kind of, like, from someone who I don't really know that well, can feel like 1,000 like mini little knives going across my hand, and and I start bleeding and freaking out in my brain. As dumb as that sounds. Or like with the noise thing, like when people are making tea or coffee or whatever, the kettles, I hate them. I want to throw kettles against the wall because they're just like start making this weird snake noise and to let the steam out, and just, really irritate me, and I just want to throw them against the wall when people are making tea or coffee. It's very annoying. I hate them. Second point, but as I said, you can be overly have sensory be overwhelmed by sensory input, like noise, or you can be under to the point where like your hearing isn't bad per se, but it's like you need constant stimuli. Like this person might be then interested in like heavy metal and only ever listen to heavy metal and crank it up really high because they need that level of volume / stimuli, and that, whereas someone else like myself, I usually like things being a lot quieter and like people talking quieter and more monotone and being in quieter areas and just listening to birds chirp. But even then, the frequency of a bird chirp can be quite ear-piercing, but like I'd rather listen to that than lots of people bustling and hustling about in, say, Leeds city centre, but yeah, that's just me. The second point I've got is specialist interests. Spoiler alert, if you haven't been on my channel before, Doctor Who is my specialist interest, or, certain video games like Splatoon. I adore that series of video games, or comic books, certain comic book characters I really like Spider-Man and Deadpool, and, I quite like Fantastic Four as well, if I'm being completely honest, or like Star Wars. I'm pretty into Star Wars as well, and like Star Wars Lego, and The Mandalorian has really sort of taken its, grabbed me or put hooks into my person, which sounds weird. But yeah, specialist interests, like what I mean by that is like even if they get into sort of the sort of teen years of their life, if they are on the spectrum, then they will either stop liking the thing that they liked as a kid, but also like we can stop liking things, but we never lose that sort of intensity of like childlike curiosity / ferviment. Is that even a real word? I don't know, but sort of, when you ask most non-autistic people or neurotypical people, like, oh, what did you think about this thing, or like, did you know this thing about this team, or what's going on next with this band, or what did they do 2-3 albums ago, this band? And someone who's non-autistic might just be a bit like, I don't know, just Google it, what's your problem, man, sort of thing. Whereas someone like myself or some other autistic people I know would tell you, would have encyclopedic knowledge of said band, or in my case, as I say, Doctor Who, or Rick and Morty, or the Mario Kart series, or it can be stuff less nerdy like a football team. They might know everything about Manchester, or some other team, I don't know football, but or as I say, it can be a bit more less nerdy, and less mainstream, but also quite quirky, for lack of a better term. Like their specialist interest might literally be something as specific as trees, and needing to know everything about trees, and why do they have so many rings when you chop them down, and what type of tree is the oldest type of tree, what is the newest type of tree we've ever discovered, do trees communicate with each other, which, fun fact, they do, but it's kind of depressing because obviously they can't actually talk, but they do in a weird way communicate. I'm pretty sure I learned a fact about that on QI once. Something to do with the roots, maybe, that helps them communicate, I think, between each other. But anyway, yeah, our interests can change, but sometimes they can be very long interests. Like, I've been watching Doctor Who since I was about 6 or 7 years old, 7 or 8 years old, and I'm 23 now, so I've been watching it for about 16 years. But then also I like Star Wars, but that's sometimes that has changed in terms of like the intensity of how much I've liked Star Wars, or like dinosaurs and cars. I used to probably really like them as a kid, but then as I got older, less so. Or like I distinctly remember sort of liking in primary school history as a subject, and history in terms of like learning about it and war and that, and I was fascinated by guns and World War One and Two and that. But then by early secondary school, mid secondary school, I sort of history just kind of went to the wayside, and I just really didn't care about it anymore. But yeah, specialist interests. 3, volume of voice. They might have a very loud voice or a very quiet voice, but chances are, if they are definitely on the autistic spectrum and have autism or Asperger's, they will not more than likely have a correct volume or the correct volume of voice in any given social situation. I feel like that's a very common trait amongst people on the spectrum. Or if that isn't the case, they've probably had a lot of help from family and friends and sort of I don't know, like support workers / key workery people, or like people at school or college, or a special school or whatever, to sort of really sort of help and take a big step back about tone of voice and volume as well, in particular. Like processing other people's voices is something that I find very, very, very difficult even to this day. And likewise with my own volume, most of the time my mum's always like, "What, you're mumbling?" But then because my dad is undiagnosed autistic, I'll say something and he can hear it like a hawk. And likewise with myself, like my mum in the past, I'll be getting a bath and she would be near towards the bottom of the stairs, and she'd say something like, "Oh, you're a pain in the bum," or whatever, when I was like a kid, and I'd be like, "I heard that," but then I'd say something as quiet as that, and she'd be like this close to my person, and she'd be like, "What? I can't hear you. What? Why are you mumbling?" sort of thing. So yeah, very, very strange, that one. 4th point, focusing on one person. Whether it's a family member or a person that you go to school or college with, you much like with the specialist interest, you unintentionally kind of hyper-focus on one person, like, which, as you can imagine, I'm going to go on an educated limb and say it becomes a bit more of a difficulty / maybe a roadblock / negative as you get older, because the assumption is that as you get older you just know how to deal with more people in life, and also like more people but with less sort of intensity of sort of interaction, if that makes sense. Like, you don't need to know when the busman's birthday is or the corner shop man's birthday is, but you do if they're a friend or one of your friends, not the corner shop person or the bus driver, but like if you have a friend, or in particular a best friend, you need to know that when their birthday is, or like a family member. But like juggling all that and spreading out your sort of social interactions and managing expectations and whatnot, it's tiring, it's difficult, it's very complicated, and it's very messy as well, which might explain why myself and other autistic people tend to accidentally or unintentionally hyper-focus on one person. And especially with the fact that, as well, if like someone is like sick or unwell, or they've been on holiday for a while, and then you don't see them a lot, and then you socially interact with someone else, but they've been more consistent in your life, as it were, then you build up a better rapport, and like, why wouldn't you then hyper-focus, for lack of a better term, on that person as opposed to the other person? Because then it's like playing catch up, if that makes sense. It's like with TV shows, what I love about them, or at least on modern streaming services, is a lot of the time they have like a recap from season to season. People don't have that, which is very annoying. Which might again explain why people on the spectrum hyper-focus on a person, because then it's that way you don't forget things as much. If you see a person every few days during the week, but then you stop talking to them for 2 plus weeks there and then talk to them, you'd be a bit like, wait, what happened last time we chatted? Are we okay now? Has a lot changed with you? Do you know what I mean? Like, it'd be a bit more difficult for us to sort of jump back into that, whereas I don't think that is the case with non-autistic people. I don't think. But yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth point, eye contact. I've always really struggled with that. I think it's just because it's like being like sort of very vulnerable with a person, and also being very sort of open and vulnerable, but also like, you know, it takes a lot of time for me to build up that rapport and that sort of level of trust in another person, I think. But even then, I do it very fleetingly. But also, like, a lot of people on the spectrum take it very literally. Like, when you first say it to someone on the spectrum, I feel like when you say, oh, you need to give eye contact, you need to look at a person in their eyes, then we'll do it and be like this. And then obviously the other person will be like, whoa, you're effing psycho, like, are you trying to kill me, man? Like, what the hell's your problem, sort of thing. But we don't realise, like, we shouldn't just be staring at them. Like, you know, you have to kind of, like, look, don't look, don't look, like, sort of thing. But a trick that another autistic person and a learning support staff once told me, a learning support staff told me first at secondary school, and then another person a couple of years back, once when they were at mine, another autistic person, like, I'd had this advice twice, so hopefully this will help other people. But if you are struggling with eye contact, which I do, the trick would be to focus on people's noses or their forehead, because most of the time, if you do that, genuinely, most non-autistic people don't even notice you're not actually specifically looking into their eyes, that you're, as I say, looking at the end of the nose or the forehead. So that's pretty cool, that you can kind of get away with that. Next point would be a good sense of humour. I'd like to think I have a good sense of humour. I think because my brain jumbles up a lot of things, and words and memories and thoughts and feelings, that sometimes it can be kind of funny, or be hopefully taken in a funny way. I mean, it can also be taken not so funny, depending on the social situation. But I'd like to think a lot of people who have gotten to know me over the years I'd like to think they think that I'm funny. You know, like, I don't take myself too seriously. I used to when I was a lot younger, but these days not so much. I just sort of, I don't know, like, as I say, I sometimes say something and it's the wrong thing, but fortunately my family know me obviously well enough to just go, that's funny, you know, and start laughing and that, but not in a, haha, you made a mistake, more, haha, that's funny because, you know, it was something none of us expected, that's kind of funny, you know, or that it's so sort of out of our point of view, that, or point of reference, that's kind of hilarious. You know, but not all autistic people will be funny. Not all non-autistic people are funny. You know, it's just a certain thing that happens with certain people. And I guess as well, being a Gibson as well, being part of the family that I am part of, that might also be a factor as well, because a lot of people in my family are genuinely pretty funny. You know, or at least try to be / strive to be as well. Being academic, you know, the person in question might be very academic, you know, whether it be in English or maths or you know, sort of computers, which I guess coincides with maths, likewise with science, or, you know, as I say, English or geography or whatever, you know, they might be very academic, they might go really far in terms of their academic prowess and their academic sort of journey. You know, I think the last statistic I saw, which again might be out of date by now, but 45% of all people in the UK or 45% of all university students have autism or Asperger's. So that's obviously almost half, you know, and again, I think it's because by that point you are very much that granular in terms of the specific thing you're studying, and that goes hand in hand with, like, the autistic brain, I think. And that, so yeah, being very academic. But again, you might not be. You might be autistic and be very creative, which is my next point. You know, you might be very much the opposite, you know, be really bad at reading and writing, but be really good at drawing. You know, you can draw epic dinosaurs or robots from Robot Wars, or, you know, I don't know, like, really cool poster of all the different Doctors from Doctor Who, or like a really cool imaginative sort of almost anime-esque epic battle poster or something, you know. But if someone said to you, write a 10-page story, anime-based story, even though you'd be interested by the subject matter, it might be difficult for you because you might have difficulties with that, academically wise or whatever, and might not be academic, but as I say, be creative. You know, you might make short animated films in your bedroom with Lego or with plasticine. You might be the next person to do, like, you know, the Wallace and Gromit sort of stuff. Last 2 points are difficulty to connect with people. You know, I think a common misconception with people on the spectrum is that none of us want to interact with anyone else, you know, that we hate everyone. You know, but as my mum would say, it's more sometimes people on the spectrum can come across, if not have already, for lack of a better term, as depressing as this is to say out loud, can give up on socially interacting with people in person, because the fact that we've just had X amount of, you know, sort of negative experiences slash sort of, you know, like people shutting the door in his face sort of thing, or mistakes and like put downs and that, you know. You know, like I feel like it's almost like, for lack of a better term, like I try to connect with people, but like there are invisible barriers there, you know, like an invisible wall in a video game, like that's there sometimes, you know, like, but also I'm socially aware enough to see like other people can organically like communicate and talk to people, and I wish I could do that, but it annoys me that I can't all the time, and then like, as I say, it just sort of gets under my skin sometimes, you know, like, because, as I say, then people just are like, oh, well, shouldn't you be just on your own, not even wanting to talk to us, and that, and it's like, well, not really. If I don't even spend time or be around other people, and how am I supposed to even understand slash have any point of reference as to how people, normal people, for lack of a better term, communicate with each other, you know? And that, I guess, another thing that I totally forgot to put down on this list is, body language, not understanding that. I mean, 90% of human communication is body language and facial expressions, and that just goes over my head, you know, like, a lot of the time I just assume people are either angry with me or, you know, kind of like constipated or happy, or constipated, happy, angry, and sad, and that's kind of depressing as well, you know. You know, but again, I do think people are happy as well. But like for example, my dad will only ever really know if I'm sad, if I'm crying, and that's about it. Whereas I'd like to think my mum would have a better idea. But then also, because my brain doesn't function like a normal person's brain, even though I'm, you know, like, apparently if you're like this, hunched over and kind of like sort of more like this, and I was like playing a Nintendo Switch, that apparently makes it look like I'm sad when I'm not. I'm fine, which is kind of weird to me. You know, yeah, apparently if you were just more like open with your body, that signals that you're happy, which is a bit weird, because again, I might still be upset more then, you know. I don't know, I just find that weird. But as I say, difficulty to connect with people, which again might go back to that earlier point of just then focusing on one person. Because if you've got a good rapport with that person, then you would want that more, I guess, if that makes sense. If out of 10 people you only have a connection with 2 of those people, if not just one of those people, then spoiler alert, logically you're gonna go to that one person as opposed to the other, you know, 8 or 9 people, you know. The last point that I have is delayed speech. You know, you might have, when you're younger, like, for example, myself, on a personal level, I had delayed speech. I don't think I started talking till I was, like, around 5 or 6. and that, but as my nan would say, I definitely made up for it afterwards, you know, after I figured out how to speak and that, so yeah. Um, yeah, but as my mum would point out, like, it's either that or it's the complete opposite, or like the either extreme apparently, like when the babies, like, if they have an over advanced vocabulary at a young age, or in my case, and mainly guys, mainly males, because we're quite lazy, let's be honest, guys, we have delayed speech, whereas I've noticed that maybe it's more common that the advanced speech is with females on the spectrum, maybe, you know. But yeah, these are just different things that I've picked up over the years, and if any of this helped anyone, that's awesome, and yeah, I hope people take something away from this video, even if it's been a very boring, long one, long, boring video. But yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you check out my other videos, and comment, rate and subscribe to the channel.